OXFAM says the G7 summit has failed to confront the challenges of the world. The organisation says even as the world is faced with the biggest health emergency and a climate catastrophe that is destroying the planet, G7 leaders have completely failed to come up with long-term solutions to the world's most pressing challenges. Let's get more on OXFAM's reaction to the G7 summit. I'm joined now by the organisation's Anna Marriott. Anna, very good to have you with us. Why do you think the G7 has failed so dismally in this area?
So we know that we have the greatest health crisis of a century here. People are dying now. We know infection rates are rising, particularly across the continent of Africa now, and the vaccine stocks have run dry. Not enough vaccines are being made, and the G7 this weekend failed to make the promises needed to ramp up production. What we needed to see was the lifting of the patents on these vaccines and G7 leaders insisting that the vaccine science was shared so that more manufacturing could take place in countries like South Africa, across the continent of Africa, and in other low and middle income countries. Instead, what we got was a very insufficient trickle of charity. We are not going to donate our way out of this crisis. We need a solidarity approach that distributes the rights and the recipes of these vaccines so that more can be made and everybody can be protected as soon as possible. So the G7 failed to deliver that promise.
So I guess 1 billion doses seems rather patronising, doesn't it? And the big winners here again are monopolies and patents of pharmaceutical giants.
That's absolutely right. And I think what we saw this weekend here down in Cornwall was the President of the US, the President of France, supporting South Africa and India's proposal to lift the patents on these vaccines, but very much on the opposing side was Prime Minister Johnson and Chancellor Merkel. We are very disappointed with the fact that we didn't get agreement on that TRIPS waiver and that the G7 leaders didn't come together. This trickle of charity, as you say, is rather insulting. What developing countries want is not charity, but the rights and the recipes for these vaccines so we can ramp up. And as I understand it, South Africa is still waiting for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. There's been huge problems with that vaccine. The company seems to have let South Africa down, and as I understand it, only a fraction of the 2 million doses that South Africans are waiting for are due to be delivered. Now we need to see the G7 leaders responding to that crisis by insisting that there's an immediate redistribution of vaccines from those companies, but also that those patents are lifted so we can ramp up production and within a few months get those vaccine supplies up.
And obviously that concerns us as we experience our third wave, which has been pretty virulent at the moment. I mean, you would think that the G7 would rather take a long-term view here because a healthy world, a healthy Africa is, in the end, better for them.
That's absolutely right. And we know that, we know that no one is safe until everybody is safe. So I sit here in the UK. I have the hope of what this vaccine brings. It's absolutely essential that we share that hope around the world. And as you say, the longer this virus is allowed to continue, the more chance of mutations and the more likelihood that people will be at risk again, even in the countries that have been vaccinated. That would be an incredible waste, which is why we are so disappointed that the G7 leaders didn't take the action necessary to lift the patents, to lift the intellectual property rules and invest in more manufacturing and ensuring that that vaccine science is shared as a global public good.
We've seen the sort of dithering when it comes to climate change as well, haven't we? And again, countries, developing countries, many countries in Africa are adversely affected by that.
Absolutely. And, the UK will be hosting the big UN climate summit towards the end of this year. And in order to get the kind of ambitious agreements to stop this climate catastrophe, we needed to see the G7 leaders step up both on financing, but also on sharp reductions in their own emissions. And they, again, sadly failed on both of those. We just saw a rehashing of commitments on financing, financing that was promised $100 billion a year. They continue to fail to deliver that. That money is needed now for the very serious impacts of climate change in Africa, in other low and middle income countries, which of course has been caused in large part by the G7 nations through their emissions. So the failure on that is a huge disappointment. We did see some interesting noises on investment in green development, but as is often the case with these G7 summits, too little detail to know what they are actually promising and what we can hold them to account to.
Anna Marriott, very good to talk to you. Thank you.